Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. In the news tonight, we're going to talk about the latest between the Ukraine and Russia, that war taking place, including Russia not only unveiling but using their latest and what they consider the greatest missile that they have, so powerful that they're saying that we don't even need to use nuclear weapons because this one is going to do the trick. Now, we'll also talk about what President Putin had to say, that if Ukraine would ever get a nuclear weapon supplied by either the West or NATO, this is what he intends to do. So those stories and more. But first, we recently reported on the E. coli outbreak at McDonald's restaurant chains across the country due to contaminated onions. Now, more foodborne illnesses are erupting in the U.S. and possibly Canada, this time because of carrots and cucumbers.
Wow. Well, according to the CDC, E. coli found in organic carrots has caused the death of one person and sickened 39 others so far across 18 states. In addition to this, 15 people have been sent to the hospital with symptoms. Well, in response to the outbreak, Grimway Farms has issued a recall of their organic whole and baby carrots. Major food chains like Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, and Wegman have removed the carrots from their shelves.
Now, in a statement, President and CEO of Grimway Farms, Jeff Huckabee, said, quote, "We take our role in ensuring the safety and quality of our products seriously." End quote. Now, the carrots are no longer being sold in store, but you can check the FDA or Grimway Farms website to find out the brand names and see if you purchase these carrots. The contaminated carrots were sold between August and November. The CDC says if you have any of these carrots in your home, throw them away and immediately sanitize anything you think they could have come in contact with.
Wow. And yet another recall has been issued, as was mentioned. This time it's sun-fed whole cucumbers. Now, the cucumbers have been distributed across 26 states as well as to Canada. The Food and Drug Administration says the cucumbers were sold between October 12th and November 26th and are possibly contaminated with salmonella, which has caused sickness in an unknown number of people. Now, if you have any of those carrots or cucumbers, you're advised to throw them away or return them to the store where they were purchased.
Now, from their website, the CDC estimates that each year roughly 1 in 6 Americans, or 48 million people, get sick, 128,000 are hospitalized, and 3,000 people die of foodborne diseases.
Wow. Well, Vladimir Putin is making moves to change Moscow's nuclear doctrine. President Putin addressed the Russian Security Council concerning how they would respond if nuclear weapons are used against them. Currently, Russia has reserved the right to use nuclear weapons if the security of the state is at risk, which can be left up to interpretation. But now the Russian president wants to change that to allow nuclear weapon response on any attack from any state using conventional weapons such as drones, missiles, and aircraft, but of course not limited to these.
In this discussion, President Putin also stated that any attack from a non-nuclear power that has support from a nuclear power would be considered a joint attack. Now, obviously, this covers the situation with Ukraine being supported and supplied by NATO. But why is he pushing for this now?
Well, it could be that the Russian president is trying to define the Kremlin's red lines more clearly since it hasn't followed through with previous threats. So far, the West has supplied tanks, F-16 fighter jets, and missiles, among other weapons, to Ukraine without repercussions. So, because Putin has made these threats, they have started to lose their impact. And this could be an attempt to be more specific and redefine Russia's justifications for using nuclear weapons. But Until there's a Russian response, well, we won't know if it is only a threat or real Russian protocol.
And it almost seems as if President Putin is expecting Ukraine to be supplied with a nuclear weapon and therefore is clearly laying it out. This is what we're going to do if and when.
No excuse.
Well, more on the war in Ukraine. President Biden has authorized Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles to hit targets deeper inside of Russia. Now, this is seen as a shift in U.S. policy on the use of weapons in the region. The missiles have a range of 300 kilometers. Now, the UK and France are expected to allow the use of their long-range weapons, missiles, as well. Both have a range of approximately 250 kilometers.
Well, the current missiles being used by Ukraine have a range of 50 to 80 kilometers. Now, these new long-range surface-to-surface missiles have been a long-held desire of Ukraine in this war.
Well, while Ukraine is pulling out all the stops with its missiles, Russia has a new missile that is said to be so powerful they don't even need to use nukes. Now take a look at this next video for more on Russia's latest weapon. Take a look.
So nukes are the talk of the hour, but Russia believes it doesn't even need nukes. It has another mega weapon, the Orishnik missile. It's supposed to be unbeatable. No air defenses can take it down. At least that's what the Russian president claims. Moscow fired this missile at Ukraine on November 21st, and now Putin has threatened to hit Kiev with it. He says this new missile is as destructive as a nuclear weapon, but without the radioactive contamination. So what is this missile? And can it be a game changer in the Ukraine war? Our next report tells you.
It's called the Orishnik, meaning hazel tree in Russian. It's a new intermediate-range ballistic missile, IRBM. Moscow never publicly mentioned it before, but now this missile is dominating headlines. Why? Because Russia fired it at Ukraine last week, and now it threatens to hit Kyiv with the same missile. Moscow fired the Orishnik for the first time on November 21st. This missile, carrying 6 warheads, hit Ukraine's Dnipro. The damage was limited, but the missile itself has raised alarms. Russian President Vladimir Putin says it is unstoppable, that air defenses can't intercept the Orishnik.
I have already said these are quite powerful elements, which are heated to a temperature of 4,000 degrees. You can look on the internet. The temperature on the surface of the sun is 5,600 to 6,000 degrees. It is comparable to the temperature on the surface of the sun. It has a kinetic impact, a powerful impact. It is like a meteorite falling. It has a kinetic impact, a powerful impact. It is like a meteorite falling.
The Orishnik is hypersonic. That means it travels at least 5 times the speed of sound. It can also maneuver mid-flight. That makes it harder to track and intercept. Putin touts it as some great new weapon, but this is what the West has found. The Pentagon believes it's based on the RS-26 Rubesh intercontinental ballistic missile. It was capable of carrying nukes. Moscow tested it multiple times, yet it was never deployed. An examination of the debris shows that this new missile was derived from that. The missile itself was launched from Kapustin Yar, which is about 800 kilometers from Dnipro. It reached a top speed of 13,600 kilometers per hour. There wasn't much destruction, but Moscow compares it to a nuclear weapon. It says that this new weapon is just as destructive, but it doesn't carry a nuclear warhead or spread radioactive contamination.
The missile can hit even highly protected and deep-lying targets. According to military and technical experts, in the case of a massive group use of this missile, that is, several areas at once in one strike, the power of this strike will be comparable to the use of nuclear weapons, although Orishnik is of course not a weapon of mass destruction.
Russian media is obviously celebrating this. Many are calling it the next big weapon. Reports suggest that Russians are even naming their children after the Orishnik. But the West remains skeptical. Ukrainian military experts even say that there is nothing called the Orishnik, that this is just another modified intercontinental ballistic missile.
Wow, it's amazing how much effort mankind will put into new ways to harm their neighbor instead of help them. Well, the war in Ukraine has seen several winters, and there have been obstacles presented during the long, cold months of fighting. Well, this winter will come with a new one: the presidency of President-elect Donald Trump, who has promised to end the war on day one in office. Well, as a result, Russia has stepped up its war efforts. Missiles and drones have been launched and, of course, as a result, shot down by Ukraine. But several of those missiles have hit Ukraine's energy infrastructures, aka power plants. Now, with several plants reporting damage, and as a result of those attacks, it has also left 1 million Ukrainians without power. Now, this is a move, as some say, by Russia to decrease Ukrainian morale.
Well, if the Ukrainians have to go throughout the cold winter months without electricity, it's going to make for a very long and difficult winter, not only for those involved in the fighting, but of course creating yet again even more casualties of this ongoing war, men, women, and children who have nothing to do with the fighting but would like to see both sides come to a resolution and the fighting finally end. And of course, Ukraine has some very cold winters, and that'd be hard to have no heat, going through there. So
yeah, because you take into consideration that it's not just the heat, it's the water as well, because that requires electricity for the water pumps and the gas and everything.
Right.
So it throws a huge, obstacle in the place of people just trying to survive throughout the winter months. Well, Russia has given several stern warnings about what it would do if Ukraine is armed with nuclear weapons. Now, this next video sheds some light on President Putin's plans and how international moves in Ukraine could affect the entire world. Let's take a look.
Our next story is about the Ukraine war. We've seen a lot of escalations over the past 2 weeks. Ukraine started bombing Russian territory with Western weapons. Russia responded by launching a new missile, a ballistic missile called the Orishnik. This missile strike took Ukraine by surprise. It had no defense against the Orishnik. So the West is now scrambling to protect Ukraine. US President Joe Biden is sending more aid, a $725 million arms package. But that won't worry Putin. He's confident about his new weapon. He says there is no answer to the Orishnik missile. At the same time, he has drawn one clear red line.
If the country with which we are currently engaged in military operations becomes a nuclear power, what should we do? In this case, we will use everything. I want to emphasize this. All the means of destruction at Russia's disposal. We will not allow this.
That was a stark warning to the West. If they give Ukraine nuclear weapons, Russia will obliterate the country. But why did Putin make this threat? Is the West really giving nukes to Ukraine? A report to this effect has been doing the rounds. It came out last Thursday, the day when Russia launched its first Orishnik missile. This report sent alarm bells ringing in Moscow. Let me read the operative part. It says several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. That would be an instant and enormous deterrent. Apparently, some Western officials have come up with a dumb idea: giving Ukraine its nuclear weapons back. Some quick context. Ukraine used to be a nuclear-armed nation. Up until 1996, Ukraine was once a part of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union disintegrated in 1991. Its nuclear weapons were given to 4 successor states: Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. So yes, Ukraine was once a nuclear-armed nation. We don't know exactly how many nukes they had. Estimates range from 1,900 to 5,000 nuclear weapons. Now let's just take the lower estimate, 1,900. And also look at the nuclear-armed countries in the world today and the estimated number of nukes that they have. The US and Russia obviously on top with more than 5,500 each. Then comes China with 500. France has 290. The UK has 225. India 172. Pakistan 170. And so on. What do you notice here? Ukraine was believed to have had 1,900 nukes some 30 years ago. And that was a lower estimate. But that's still more than almost everyone today, barring the US and Russia. In fact, Ukraine had more nukes than most other countries put together. It had the world's 3rd largest nuclear arsenal, but the country chose to give them all up. So did Belarus and Kazakhstan. All of them gave their nukes to Russia in exchange for security guarantees. This was part of a deal known as the Budapest Memorandum. It was signed in 1994. That's when Ukraine's denuclearization began. Putin has threatened to use nukes before in this war. We keep hearing about it every few months, but this time it is different. If Ukraine gets even one nuclear weapon, then Russia loses its edge. It puts Russia in an existential crisis because you don't need thousands of nukes to level a city like Moscow. One will do. And that is why Vladimir Putin will never allow Ukraine to get a nuclear weapon again.
As I mentioned there, Katan, it would only take one nuclear weapon to level Moscow.
Right.
So, President Putin has said, look, there's no way we're going to allow Ukraine to become armed, whether supplied by the U.S. or NATO, with a nuclear weapon. And it's interesting also that Ukraine at one time was right behind Russia and the United States for the third country having the most nuclear weapons. So interesting that, the turn of events, but now, of course, they got rid of those. But Russia is saying if they ever get even one, they're going to use everything they have to stop them. Wow. Well, lastly, this final video takes us to Germany with increased fighting edging closer to nuclear. Now, Germany is making moves to start repurposing its existing bunkers left over from the Cold War, along with making new ones. Now, the fear of nuclear war is a clear and present danger, and at least one country is making some preparations to protect its citizens. Take a look at this next video for more on this hot topic.
Now let's look at the war in Ukraine, which has been on for 33 months now. But it is just entering its most dangerous phase, with major escalations from both sides recently. Ukraine has started firing Western weapons into Russian territory. It has fired American and British long-range missiles at Russia. In response, Moscow tested out a new weapon, a hypersonic ballistic missile called the Arishnik. Russia says it is the first of its kind in the world, and there is no defense against it. This has sent alarm bells ringing. Ukraine is in a panic, which is to be expected, but its Western allies are afraid too, especially Germany. So much so that Germany has begun drawing up a list of bunkers. It seems Germany believes Russia. It really thinks that there is no defense against the Arishnik. So if they can't defend themselves, they should at least be able to hide. Germany already has close to 600 bunkers. These are remnants of the Second World War and the Cold War. They currently have the capacity to shelter about 500,000 people. That's far from enough. Germany's total population is close to 84 million. So if they really want to rely on bunkers, they'll have to build a lot more. In the past, Germany had about 2,000 bunkers. So now it wants to reach and probably surpass that level. And they want to do it quick. They're looking at converting underground train stations and car parks into bunkers, similar to what Ukraine did when the war began. But that's not all. Germany is planning to convert some public and private properties as well. This was announced by their Interior Ministry yesterday. It also said it would encourage people to build their own bunkers at home, in their basements or garages. Germany also plans to roll out an app which can help guide people to the nearest bunker in case of an attack. Now, the bunker plan may sound eerily familiar. It takes us back to the Cold War when everyone thought that a nuclear attack was imminent and they were making preparations to stay safe. The Cold War ended about 35 years ago, but it seems the world is back to where it started, with Moscow and the West on the precipice. The Western military alliance NATO is considering its options. NATO is at a critical juncture trying to figure out what to do about the new Russian missile. Ukraine wants better air defenses. It hopes to shoot down the Arishnik missiles. So as usual, it wants the West to provide the equipment. But at this point, it's a tough ask. The West will have to scramble more resources together, or they may have to part with their own defenses. Both are a problem right now. Giving up their own defenses is risky because Russia has just demonstrated the power of its new missile. It's a medium-range missile. It can reach targets about 5,500 kilometers away. 5,500 kilometers, that covers all of Europe and parts of the US. So giving up their own defenses could leave the West vulnerable. The other option is to increase military production and send new equipment to Ukraine. But that will also be difficult because the biggest military aid provider is the US, and the incoming president, Donald Trump, wants to end the war.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor.
He won't keep sending blank checks to Kiev. And without the Americans, NATO can't really arm Ukraine effectively, not at present anyway. The Europeans are planning to expand their indigenous defense industries. They're planning to become more self-sufficient, less dependent on the US. But all of this will take time. Time that Ukraine does not have. There is no quick fix for Ukraine's problems and no shortcut to counter Russia's new missile. So by the looks of it, NATO can't do much except prepare bunkers.
Well, Germany is just one of many countries who have first-hand experience in dealing with the threat of nuclear war during the time period that they're referring back to of the Cold War. So yeah, they do have a lot of those bunkers, but not that we're looking forward to the nuclear war. Most people aren't, but you know, it seems that they're taking this threat seriously and trying to do things to protect its citizens when this threat actually takes effect.
Right. You know, and the thing with the bunkers, Katan, is, of course, that might help an individual or, you know, families, whatever, survive the actual blast of the nuclear wars. But, of course, you have all the devastation afterwards, the radiation, that sickness and poisoning, the devastation of the land. So, you know, even if they would manage to make it by going in the bunkers, what are they going to come back up to? You know, so it's a, you know, nuclear war at any level, you know, whether you have a bunker or not, is not something that you want to have to consider.
Yeah, they're scratching and scrambling to try to find a solution, but the only real solution seems to be to nip it at the bud and to find a peaceful solution where we're not heading towards war, but towards peace.
Right. Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them by going to any of their websites at yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael programs that you can find online. You can go to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com for more.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another classic message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.